Welcome to the summer semester at Austin Community College and to a psychology course called Human Growth and Development, something I affectionately like to refer to as womb to tomb psychology. And I call it that because it's a study of human development from conception until death. I'm Dan Grangard. I will be your instructor for this summer, and I look forward to working with you. I don't know about you, but I've always especially liked summer school for a number of reasons. Here's a confession from me. Whenever I went to summer school, I often signed up for courses I really didn't want to take, but they were required for my major or for my degree. I thought, well, I can handle it for one short summer semester and I'll be done with it. So, that's one reason why some people take a summer class. On the other hand, I've enjoyed teaching summer classes for a number of reasons. If it's in the classroom, you see everybody every day instead of 2 days a week or something for 16 weeks. You see everybody every day for a little over a month, and so you get to know people pretty quickly. One warning, of course, online, this course moves very fast. And so when we look at the syllabus together, I would suggest you try and stick with the daily outline I've put together in order to maintain the fast pace of this summer class. Another good thing about summer classes, often you're only taking one, maybe two altogether. And so you can really concentrate your study on that subject. Whereas during the regular semester, you might be taking 4 or 5 or more classes. And so you don't have as much time to devote just for one class. Well, this is a course in developmental psychology. It's a survey of the physical, cognitive, emotional, and social factors in human development from conception until death. There will be an emphasis on understanding people at various ages of development in order to be more patient with them and to interact with them more effectively. I think you'll find the course is especially well suited for students who are pursuing careers in the helping professions like counseling, psychology, and medical professions, nursing, medicine, and so on, dental hygiene, or in education, teachers and people like that. Although the course is, I think, helpful to anyone who works with people. There will be an emphasis on studying people at different stages of life so that you can better understand them and interact with them more effectively. And of course, whatever stages you've already been through yourself or are currently at, I think you'll be able to especially identify with and say, I had an experience like that I could share with someone. So let me begin by telling you some things about myself. This is a course of lifespan development, so I will give you a lifespan development look at my career. And it began when I was probably in high school. My whole life, I've primarily had jobs that involved working with people. And beginning in high school, I was a youth worker at the YMCA. I grew up in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, which is a city of about 45,000. Maybe 100,000 in the county altogether. And, I engaged in play activities and things like that with children during high school. The summer before I started college, I was a teacher's aide at an elementary school. I was assisting a teacher teaching science to students in grades 2 through 6. I went off to college at Baylor University, and there I earned 3 degrees. I have a bachelor's degree with a major in sociology and a minor in psychology, a master's degree in educational psychology, and a doctorate in educational psychology with a minor in elementary education. The first summer between my freshman and sophomore years of college, I went back to Fond du Lac and had a job as a playground director. Scattered throughout the city of Fond du Lac in the summers, they had organized playgrounds. Some were at parks, some were at school grounds. It just so happened I got assigned to the one that was perhaps closest to my house and maybe the most popular of all the playgrounds in town. At any given time, there were as many as 600 children and adolescents on the playground. And we competed against other playgrounds in track and softball and things like that. We had handicrafts and games that we played with the kids. It was a great job. I worked from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, and I got paid for playing with kids. You couldn't beat that. In fact, for a little bit of extra money, I often volunteered to also work company picnics for various corporations in town, where they were going to have the big company picnic on a weekend, and they needed somebody to keep the kids occupied with games. So it was a great way to pick up even a little bit more money. The one summer, it was between my sophomore and junior years of college, I shared an apartment with a guy from Austin. And one weekend we were out of food and out of money, and he said this would be a good weekend to go visit my parents. And so we came down here to Austin. I immediately fell in love with Austin. I said, boy, that's where I want to live someday. And so, that was kind of the goal in the back of my mind, was living in Austin one day. That following year, one of the courses I took was a social work course where you earned credit for doing community volunteer work. And I ended up volunteering to be the physical education teacher for an entire school that was nothing but kindergarten kids. And I guess I did a good enough job, because when the following summer came along and I was going to be staying in Waco again, the Waco Independent School District hired me and paid me to continue teaching physical education to these young children. So I had experience doing that. While I was working on my master's degree, I managed to land a graduate assistantship where I assisted a professor in teaching various courses And because I had a lot of experience with young children, the professor I was assigned to be the graduate assistant for was head of the early childhood program at Baylor. And so I assisted her in teaching educational psychology courses to future kindergarten teachers. While I was working on my doctorate at Baylor, then I managed to land a graduate fellowship, or it was called a teaching fellowship, where I taught undergraduate courses in educational psychology. In particular, I taught a course called Educational Psychology for Elementary Teachers, which was very similar to this course that you're taking this summer. And because of my background with young kids and having previously been the graduate assistant to the early childhood program, I also supervised student teachers in kindergartens. In fact, over a 2.5-year period, I supervised over 200 kindergarten student teachers, and I taught a seminar in student teaching. My first real position as a psychologist was that of a school psychologist for the Education Service Center Region 12 in Waco. I might add I was the only doctoral level school psychologist serving 81 school districts in 12 counties, if you can imagine. I'd get up in the morning and drive 50 or 60 miles out to some little town, give a couple of IQ tests, maybe test some kids for learning disabilities and things like that. That wasn't my idea of being a psychologist. And so I kept applying for other positions, and then I finally managed to land a position as a school psychologist for the Austin Independent School District. And I did that for 8 years. Every year I was assigned to typically at least one elementary school, one middle school, and one high school. Some years, especially in the beginning, I would get assigned 4 schools. So, I ended up with serving as a school psychologist for children from kindergarten through high school. During that time, I also supervised school psychology interns from Texas State University down in San Marcos and from the University of Texas at Austin. Well, all psychologists get to the point where they say, I want to do things my way. And they get the idea that they want to start a private practice. And so I had a good friend who was a gynecologist, obstetrician, and he let me use his office rent-free in the evenings to start my private practice in. So I started a private practice in psychology in a gynecology office. There's a lot of funny stories I could tell you about that experience. Eventually, though, there was a student at Austin High who was angry because although she was graduating in the top 10 in her class, she wasn't going to get to be the valedictorian because she hadn't taken enough advanced placement and honors classes and things like that. So in anger, she would send death threats to the principal and the assistant principal. She sent the assistant principal's first name was Jack. And she sent him a poem one day that said, "Death be nimble, death be quick. Forget the candlestick, kill Jack." And then you always knew it was from her because she had her own little logo that looked like this, that she would draw at the bottom of the threatening note. When you do that, you get to meet the school psychologist. And as you could probably predict, this young lady already had a psychiatrist on the outside. So I started consulting with him, and he and I really hit it off, and he suggested I might want to move my private practice into his office, that it would be a more appropriate setting. You know, the good thing about being a school psychologist, of course, is you get the summers off. And so in the summer, I could do my private practice full time. And once I started combining my work with this guy who was a psychiatrist, he was the only child and adolescent psychiatrist on both the city and state's health plan. So we had a lot of people coming through our office, and he would give me lots of referrals for psychological testing. Inevitably, if I hit it off with the patient, he'd say, "Why don't you go ahead and do the therapy too?" You know, a lot of psychiatrists are more into prescribing medications than they are into necessarily doing psychotherapy. So, suddenly my private practice was booming. The school district wanted to give me a promotion, but it would mean having to give up my private practice, and I didn't want to do that. And so my office was in Medical Science Center over there on 38th Street. And so the psychiatrist helped me gain clinical privileges at 3 different private psychiatric hospitals in town. And so, suddenly I was doing a lot of hospital work as well. Well, this psychiatrist friend of mine and colleague loved being a psychiatrist, but he hated dealing with insurance companies. And so he had an opportunity to move to Dallas and be the chief psychiatrist for the adolescent unit at a psychiatric hospital. And so he left Austin, and he wanted me to come too, but I wanted to stay in Austin. And so I continued in private practice for a while. I got, when I started doing a lot of hospital work, I started to meet lots of other psychiatrists, and pretty soon many of them were sending me referrals for psychological evaluations and people they thought I could do good therapy with. And so, I was getting along just fine. But then there was a big psychiatric clinic in Dallas that wanted to open a satellite clinic in Austin. And to make a long story short, I ended up merging my private practice with this large psychiatric clinic. I became their chief psychologist, director of testing, and director of intern training. While I was at the clinic, we developed a national clinical internship training program at the clinic that I presided over. Eventually, and a couple of things I'd tell you about the clinic. It had about half a dozen psychiatrists, equal number of psychologists. There were licensed professional counselors, clinical social workers, nurses. The clinic was so big that we had our own day hospital. There were about 50 medical professionals working at the clinic. We had our own inpatient unit at Shoal Creek Hospital. And so I started leading group therapy in Shoal Creek Hospital. It was like every other weekend. I did that for 7 years. So I became very involved in the clinic. Couple of the psychiatrists specialized in children, but there was one psychiatrist in particular that specialized in geriatrics. And so, for him, I was working also on the geriatric unit at Shoal Creek Hospital. So I was working with kids, senior citizens, adults in general. And, at that point, I was even doing dementia evaluations of senior citizens. So I was really working with the entire lifespan. And I share this with you because in this course, and really in all the courses that I teach, I'm known for backing everything we study up with a actual case study, if you will. A lot of textbook authors and people like that, they'll have case examples that they heard about, or maybe that they just made up. But with me, everything we study, I will back up with a real life example. And I think that will make the course come alive for you. Well, this large psychiatric clinic eventually was bought out by a chain of clinics out in California. I decided to go back into private practice. I opened an office out in Westlake Hills. And it wasn't too long after that an opportunity came along to start also teaching courses at Austin Community College. And after I had done that for about 2 years, opportunities came along to also teach courses at St. Edward's University. So it got to the point where I remember one semester, I was teaching like 3 classes at ACC and 4 at St. Ed's. And at St. Ed's, I was teaching everything from counseling to tests and measurements to social psych to you name it. And so all I had time for my private practice was Fridays. So, I was only bringing in enough money to cover my overhead for the month. And so opportunity came along to work at ACC full-time, half-time advising and counseling students in student accessibility services, and then half-time teaching. And so I jumped at the chance. And so this is like, I'm beginning like my 26th or 27th year at ACC. So that's kind of my background, where I'm coming from in teaching this course. When you're finished watching the orientation video, at least sometime in the next few days, shoot me an email and introduce yourself to me. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your major? What are your career goals? Tell me something interesting about you. I actually had a couple of students in the past make little videos like this one on their cell phones or on their computers, and they sent those to me. So, I'd love to learn more about you. By the way, if you're watching this, I post any videos that I make on YouTube. I've got my own YouTube channel. And I've discovered in watching some of my YouTube videos that every 10 minutes or so, a commercial pops up now. And what I would tell you is these are unbeknownst to me, and they're not commercials that I have approved or anything like that. I discovered when I was watching one of my own videos that suddenly, here's an ad, and what's it for? Sports bras. So it's good to know that sports bras are helping fund my educational videos. For about 16 or 17 years at ACC, I used to teach human sexuality, so I guess that's an appropriate commercial for anything that I'm teaching. The last one I saw, though, it had something to do with growing plants or something. So there's no telling. When you shoot me an email telling me about yourself, let me know what kind of crazy commercials they exposed you to. I assume you're going to click skip ad, but just in case, let me know what I'm selling. It might be something I'm not too keen about. I don't guess there's anything I can do with it. Okay, click on the tab that has to do with the course syllabus, and we'll take a look at that. The textbook for the course is The Developing Person Through the Lifespan, the 11th edition. The 12th edition just came out, and I'll probably be using it in the fall, but I'll still be using the 11th edition this summer. It's by Kathleen Berger, and she is a magnificent person. I've gotten to know her over the years. A number of years ago, she actually came to Austin. In fact, she's been here several times, and I've gotten together with her for dinner and to discuss various things. One of those editions that she had, I was one of the reviewers for. Anyway, she teaches at the Bronx Community College in New York, and she is a most fantastic teacher and a delightful human being. I think you'll enjoy the textbook. It's a very comprehensive textbook, and so, there's not time to read and cover every last thing in it, even during the regular semester, much more during the summer. But I think you'll like the book. There are different versions of it in terms of online versions and used paperback versions and hardcover versions and so on. Get yourself the cheapest version you can. For that matter, if there's an older edition that you can get cheap, get it. I will keep you up to date on all the latest developments, and so I don't think you're going to have to worry about the information being obsolete. In fact, in this course, the emphasis will be on PowerPoint lecture material and handouts and video clips and things like that I will be assigning. The textbook is there more than anything else to help you better understand things that I may introduce that still maybe aren't clear in your mind. On the other hand, I think this is a course where everything will be pretty understandable. Okay, if you take a look at the first page of your syllabus then, where it says course requirements promote academic success. And the first one is, read the textbook. Students tend to read at a pace that follows the syllabus outline. And if you look at beginning on page 4 of your syllabus, I have a listing of what topic and what corresponding chapter we'll be studying on what day. You know, this is an online class, but I've set up the syllabus as if you are going to study Monday through Saturday. You know, obviously there are days when you might study more than a day's worth, and days when you're going to say, I got better things to do than study psychology. But notice today, Tuesday, May the 30th, you know, it's course orientation and discussing the syllabus. When I was a student, I had a couple of pet peeves, and one of those was I was never very good at outguessing professors regarding what reading material was important or significant and what was not. And, you know, I would get my textbooks and I would underline things. I would highlight them with a highlighter, and I would underline stuff, and I'd write notes in the margins, and none of that was on the test. And then stuff I thought was insignificant, there were a bunch of questions on the test about. That will not happen in this course. Beginning on page 5, there are specific learning objectives for each chapter in the text. And so before you read a chapter in the text, read the learning objectives for that chapter. And that way, when you're reading the chapter, what I was hoping you would focus on, it's whatever are in the learning objectives, okay? All that other stuff, you know, obviously there'll be things that for you are significant because they're meaningful. But if you want to know what may be on the test, it's the stuff that's listed in the learning objectives. For that matter, when you're preparing for a test, you can study the learning objectives as questions, study questions. Although, before each test, I will also list, I will provide a list of study questions for that test. Back to the front page, course requirement number 2, regularly check the announcements on Blackboard. That's how I will communicate with you important things and so on. If it's super important, I'm afraid you haven't looked at Blackboard, I'll probably shoot everybody an email too. But in a summer class like this, I really think you need to check the announcements on Blackboard on a daily basis and not just once in a while. Okay, point number 3, exercise self-discipline. Again, try to keep pace with the suggested daily course timeline. And before each test, I'll also have on Blackboard a live, you know, we'll set a time, test review session where you can ask me questions and I can ask you questions, and we can kind of study for tests together. I always say, who better to study for a test with than the person that wrote the questions? So if you can, attend the online test review sessions. But if you can't, I will record them and you can always go back later and watch. You just wouldn't be in position to ask some questions yourself during the review session. If, in my opinion, you've fallen significantly off the suggested pace of the course, I'll try and contact you. But if we're on test 3 and you haven't even done 1 yet, I'll be concerned that you're not going to be able to make it, and I'll drop you from the class before I'll end up having you wind up with a failing grade. I don't want that to happen. Point number 4, there will be 4 tests. And one thing I would tell you about the tests is I write my own questions. I don't use test banks from textbook authors and things like that. As a matter of fact, I've written the test questions for any number of textbook authors. In graduate school, I had at least a half a dozen courses in test construction. In fact, they were my favorite classes. So I enjoy writing test questions. It's very time consuming, by the way. Don't think it's easy to write a question. I found it takes me about an hour to write 5 questions. So it's very, very time consuming thing. If you look on page 3, there's more information about the exams. The tests will be multiple choice, true, false, open notes, open book, and you take the tests on Blackboard. Don't think, though, you can just not be doing all the work all along and then just looking up the answers on the tests. I don't think you'll find that very easy to do. When we write test questions, there's a thing called Bloom's taxonomy, which is it's related to learning objectives and writing test questions. And in particular, we concern ourselves with the first 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And the first level kind of question would be a knowledge level question. That would be something you probably could look up the answer to. A definition of a term or something like that. A fact. Facts kind of bother me, though, because a lot of the things that people present as facts really aren't facts. We discover years later that it was actually more of a theory or a hypothesis. It wasn't necessarily a fact. And so you got to be kind of careful about writing questions that involve facts. But that's a knowledge level question. And, those are basically pretty easy and the kind of thing you could look up. I don't have very many of those on my test. Next level question would be what we call a comprehension level question. And this would be, can you pick out an example of something? And then the next higher level question would be an application level question. And that means, can you take what you've learned and apply it? Can you make a prediction? Most of my test questions are at the comprehension and application levels. So again, it's not just something you can look up the answer to, but certainly you can refer to your notes. You can go back and look at lectures, PowerPoints, and everything else in order to succeed at responding to these test questions. But you need to have studied the material. And I think if you have studied the material, and particularly if you've studied the review test questions or attended or at least watched a test review session, I don't think you have any trouble with the tests at all. Students in this class tend to make pretty good grades. It has intro to psych as a prerequisite, and most of the students in this course are serious students. They want to go into nursing or dental hygiene or sonography or medicine or get an advanced psychology degree or something. And so it's rare that people don't do well in this course. And I don't think it's because the course is ridiculously easy. I think it's because they're good students. Back to page 3 about the exams. Each one has a deadline, and again, if you look at your course daily outline on page 4 and 5, notice test 1 will be available on Tuesday, June the 6th, and you need to have finished it by Saturday, June the 10th. That's the deadline for completing test 1. Ideally, if you study this material all along and then you take the test on the day that it's available, you'll breeze through it. If you put things off, that's where you get in trouble. And I say that because, although you've got until Saturday the 10th of June to complete test 1, now you're way behind because you should have been studying all the stuff in between that has been made available since test 1 was made available. So try and maintain the pace that's I've set up in the syllabus. Test 2 will be available on Wednesday, June the 14th. The deadline for completing it is Saturday, June 17th. And then test 3 will be available on Friday, June 23rd. And the deadline for completing it is Tuesday, June 27th. And then the last test will be available on June 29th, and it's due the next day, June the 30th. So again, the semester moves awfully fast. Once everyone has completed the test on the due date, then I will post on Blackboard statistics. You'll know right away when you're finished with the test how you did on it, but you won't be able to see what you missed until everyone else has taken the test. And on that day, statistics for the class will be posted on Blackboard, and that way you can see how you did compared to everybody else. Each test will also have a bonus essay, and that will be sent to you via email. And bonus essays, which they're worth like an extra 5 points. And by the way, this is not extra credit. I do not offer extra credit. Extra credit is something some people allow students to do who are not doing well and they're trying to catch up. That's not what this is all about. Because, the problem with things like that is if you're doing extra credit to try and catch up, then you're not studying what you should be studying for the next test. So I don't offer extra credit. This is bonus points. And so some people prefer essays. And so if you choose to answer, usually there will be 2 or 3 essays to pick from, and whichever one you choose to respond to, you can earn up to, if you do a good job, 5 points added on to your score, whatever your score was on the multiple choice parts of the test. But if you choose to do a bonus essay, it must be submitted on the same day that you've taken the test. Okay? So, it's not like you can take the test and, your score wasn't as good as you had hoped, and so now you're going to try and get extra credit. It's not extra credit. It's bonus points. It's a way to boost your score higher even before you know what the score is. Okay? Bonus essay should be emailed as an attachment to me to my email address, which is there on page 3, dgran@austincc.edu. If you have a disability of some kind and you need special test accommodations, let me have your accommodations letter as soon as possible so that I can make those arrangements. Over on page 2, up at the top, you can see how to contact me. I will also have office hours via Blackboard Collaborate Ultra on Monday nights from 7 until 8 o'clock, where I'll be available. You can ask me questions about anything, and I'll be happy to meet with you. If that doesn't work, shoot me an email and tell me what times would work for you, and we'll just make an appointment where I can get together with you on Blackboard Collaborate Ultra and discuss your situation. Okay? You know, that other pet peeve I had as a student was professors would go on forever about something, and then there'd be 1 or 2 questions on the test about it, and then something they barely talked about, there'd be all kinds of questions about. That will never happen in here. What's emphasized in the course is emphasized on the test. Okay? The other course requirement, if you look at the bottom of page 1, is I'd like everyone in the class to read either a biography or an autobiography. It could be about anybody. It doesn't have to be about a psychologist or somebody like that. It could be about your favorite rock stars. I don't care who it's about. Or a book related to developmental psychology, like How to Get Your Kid to Eat, or How to Survive Life with Your Teenager, something like that. And then write a book review about it. If you choose to do a book review about a book related to developmental psychology, it needs to be just 1 page, single space typed, okay? There's a link on Blackboard here to examples of book reports and to the structured book report grading form that I developed in order to grade these things very objectively. If you choose to write a report on a biography or an autobiography, and you know, to me, those are perfect for a lifespan development course like this, then you can write up to a 2-page single space typed book report on that. In fact, if you were to click on those links on Blackboard to sample book reports, well, even before you do that, if you wanted to do one on a developmental related book, take a look at the information on pages 10 and 11 here in your syllabus. I want to make sure that you read a book that's got some credibility to it. In fact, whatever book you choose, whether it's a biography, autobiography, or a book related to developmental psychology, I have to approve the title. And the reason for that is I will not approve any title that I think will not get you a good grade. And I've banned books like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, because, the guy who wrote it had a mail order doctorate from somewhere in Canada, and it was really all just his own opinion. He's laughing all the way to the bank, but, I want you to read a book by someone who would be a credible author who's got some bona fide credentials. Like if you wanted to read a good book about the differences between men and women, read something like The Female Brain by Luann Brisendine, or The Male Brain by Luann Brisendine. She's a physician. I want to say she graduated from Stanford Medical School or somewhere like that, or maybe she's on the faculty there. I can't remember now. It's a small paperback book, and half the book is a list of references. Beware of any book that doesn't have a list of references in the back, because chances are it's just the author's own opinion on things. So the author should be qualified. The book should be based on sound scientific theory. It should not promise the impossible and that sort of thing. If you take a look at sample reports that I have, for example, I've got one there for a developmental psychology related book, and it's called SOS Help for Parents. It's basically a book all about discipline for your kids. So anyway, it should be a one-page report like this, and there should be a bibliographic entry where you just have the author's name, the year the book was written, the title of the book, and the name of the publisher. Then a section on information about the author. Again, I want to know, where did the author get their training? Where have they worked? How did they become an authority on this topic? And then what were the main points of the book? What was the thesis? And then finally, your evaluation of the book. And by that, I mean, how did the author support or fail to support the thesis, the main points? Did they list studies that have been done? Did they list a long list of related works? Was it all about case examples of people they had worked with, and so on? How did they support that thesis? If you choose to do a book that's a biography or an autobiography, again, you would have a bibliographic entry there where you've got the author's name, the year the book was written, the title of the book, the name of the publisher, and then a section where you've got highlights of the individual's life. And maybe that would involve their career. And then a section on life setbacks. Anybody who's anybody, has had all kinds of challenges during their life. Nobody, you wouldn't want to read a book where, I was born and everything went perfect my whole life. I'm just so happy. Would you really want to read that book? Almost anybody you can think of who's ever been anybody and has done anything significant has had all kinds of challenges during their lifetime. So, what were those setbacks that the person experienced? And then what lessons were conveyed to you, the reader? What was your favorite snapshot of the person's life? And then need to do a little brief ecological analysis. You'll learn more about what this is about in the next lecture or two. It's basically a discussion of the microsystems, exosystems, macrosystems, and chronosystems that affected the person's life. And then finally, your evaluation of the book. I will post on Blackboard a list of books that have already been taken. Again, I need to approve the title, so as soon as you can, run some titles by me. And if I approve your title, then I will list your on the list of books already taken. And everybody in the class has to read a different book. I don't want two people reading the same book. So I need to know by the day of the first test. That's the deadline for telling me what book you are going to read. And again, that is Saturday, June the 10th. Okay? All right. Back to page 3. Just a few words of caution. Academic dishonesty will result in a failing grade on the assignment or test. So, don't think you can buy a book report online or think you can go on artificial intelligence and say, write me a book report on a biography on Dan Grangard. It would be interesting to see what AI came up with, but probably who? I never heard of the guy. But in all seriousness, don't try and do anything so foolish. In the 7 years I've been on the faculty here, I've had a couple of students, just a handful, maybe 3 or 4, attempt to cheat by buying a book report online or something like that. Don't do anything so foolish. The whole point is that you'll read a book about something you're interested in and analyze it. Not read a book somebody else was interested in and analyzed. Had a guy one time turn in a book report. I called him into my office. I said, "You didn't write this book." "Yeah, I did. It's all my work." I go, "Well, no, it's not. Here, I'll show you on my computer where you can find it on the web, word for word." He goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't write it." I said, "Well, how much did you pay for it?" He said, $30. I said, "Wow." I said, it's a C report. You could have at least bought an A report for $30. And now that I know you didn't write it, it's a F report. It's just, don't do anything so foolish. That's academic dishonesty. You can quote other people to your heart's content, but make sure you give them credit for the ideas. Don't try and pass them off as your own. That's what we call plagiarism. By the way, you'll be submitting your book reviews through Blackboard, and there's a program that it gets run through to see how genuine it is. And I'm happy to say, since we started doing it this way, I haven't had anybody do anything inappropriate. Um, Cheating on tests, this is an online class, but it's not like you can get together with one of your friends who's also taking the class and do the test together. That would be what we call collusion, and that would also be wrong. One Many years ago, I had a couple of students in a course cheating on a test. And it was a guy and his girlfriend, and they were both in the same class, and they all sat next to each other. And on test days, she would wear a baseball cap kind of pulled down over her eyes, so I couldn't see her eyes. But, I sat there and I watched her copying his answers. And, when I scored the test, they had exactly the same grade, and they missed the exact same questions, and they put the exact same wrong answers. I called them into my office and confronted them about it. I don't know why people do things like this. That's not learning anything. The whole purpose of education is learning things, learning how to do things, learning how to think. There's too much emphasis, I think, in general on grades and coming up with the answer and all that. Wouldn't it be great if you could just, every year I have to, well, every 2 years now, I have to acquire 40 continuing education credits in order to renew my license in psychology. And, I've ended up taking lately a lot of online courses, and, when at the end of the course, and, it's a lecture kind of like you're getting right now, and it lasts all day long, and, it gets pretty boring. And, you're taking notes, and it's open notes, open book and all of that. But then there's a million, multiple choice questions that you got to get right. And in some cases, there's essay questions at the end. And then, you got to submit your answers, and then you find out, and, passing is like 80% right or something. I recently took a 6-credit class where I just sat all day in a seminar, and then at the end filled out an evaluation, and I got my credits. You know what? I learned a whole lot more that way. Wouldn't it be great if education could just be like that? There's so much emphasis on grades. I know it's difficult. Okay, I think that pretty well sums up everything that I would want to talk to you about before the course commences. And certainly feel free to shoot me an email with any additional questions you might have. And again, I want you to shoot me an email ASAP and tell me about yourself. What your interests are, what you like to do for fun, why you're taking this class. Okay? Nice to meet you.